Before we get on to item number 2 of the agenda, I was not expecting to chair the meeting this afternoon, and I do need to leave at 5:30, and so I'm going to beg your indulgence to adjust the agenda somewhat. Under item number 3, we'll take up items 3A, B, and E, and then move on to the closed session items, and then come back to items C and D, those updates after the closed sessions. Is anyone on the executive committee opposed to that?
Not at all.
Very well. Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting have been posted. Did anyone notice any irregularities or corrections that need to be made to the minutes?
No corrections.
Nothing here.
Seeing none, the minutes will stand as posted. Moving on to item number 3. Item 3A, Next Generation Housing Funding Request for EDWC Retainer for Hart and Homestead Incentive. And for that, we have Deb Sealski with background information.
Yep, good afternoon. So there's a request to utilize Next Gen Housing funds for funding a staff retainer for EDWC. They are our contracted agent for the Hart and Homestead program. The request is for $379,409. Due to the high demand of the Hart and Homestead and the growth of the program, there's definitely a need, high demand on the resources and time of EDWC in working in the front part of the Hart and Homestead program. Due to the growing operations of EDWC, dedicating staff time on a time and materials basis really does not allow for that flexibility to manage the program in real time. So we're proposing a retainer model. So Washington County will have the flexibility to adapt to the market needs and demands and open the applications where it makes sense. It will also enable EDWC to hire a staff person to help with the long-term management of the program. This request typically would have gone through the Next Gen Housing Committee, but we were unable to form a quorum before this meeting. But they were invited to attend this meeting and provide any comments that they might have to it. So the request is before you for $379,409 for a retainer for EDWC to continue their work in the Hart and Homestead program as our contracted agent.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Supervisor Schulteis, Supervisor Shadrin.
I was going to ask about that.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Kelling.
Any idea, I mean, so this program is supposed to be, currently as it stands, it's just for 1,000 homes, correct?
That is, you're referring to the 1,000 home is actually Next Generation Housing?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the homes are, how long do you anticipate this program would go?
Great. So the Hart and Homestead program has been very popular. The county board just approved the funding for $500,000 per year. I know that we're also seeking potentially additional donations from businesses in the future. And I do know that there has been some discussion about bringing forward a resolution to determine when the county board should relook at that. So an end date has not been determined yet, but I believe that will be a resolution coming forward.
And then, forgive me, I can't get my computer to come up. Well, frozen, I think, from the car. So it was like 300 and how much?
It's $379,409, and that is for 3 years. It's a 3-year contract, and it is actually an amendment to our co-management agreement that the county has with EDWC.
Okay, so roughly 100,000 to
About a little less than 120,000 a year. That's a 3-year contract.
So, and that's administering about how much per year? Is that 500,000?
It's the 500,000 per year. Plus, we hope to get additional funds through donations with the businesses as well.
Okay, I guess I just have a little bit of concern. It's we're talking about dispersing 500,000 for about $120,000.
But you need to remember that there's actually a 90-day grace period, and so although all of the funds are allocated initially, there is a 90-day grace period for the applicants to either get a contract, a construction contract, or an accepted offer to purchase. And there are instances where that 90-day period lapses. We've been, at the last 2 launches that we've had, it's been about, well, we haven't determined the second launch, but the first launch that we had, it was about 30% had of recipients, those launches, it did not go through for those applicants. So about 30% of the applicants, those funds were returned back to the available funds for that program. So although it's $500,000 initially at the beginning of the year, there will be turnover and there will be lapses in those 90-day grace period to get the funding. So we do anticipate that we will have an initial release of those funds, and then as the 90-day grace period lapses, then there will be funds available to reopen this. And what the retainer model allows is for the EDWC staff to react quickly and open those funds up as necessary. And there will be a trigger amount, let's say $260,000, that is accumulated in that pot, whether it be from that 90-day grace period lapsing or whether it's from additional donated funds, that they will be able to open that up and be very nimble about that process throughout the course of the year.
I guess I understand it.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the way this program is done, it just seems like there's a lot of work I know that goes into this, and certainly by EDWC, and I get all that.
Mm-hmm.
Staff time is expensive, but to administer this program, it seems like an awful large amount compared to what we're administering. The percentages seem. I would ask that it probably just be looked at and see, is there a different way that this could be done more efficiently or something? I mean, I guess it's just, I have concerns. Not saying that I would go against it necessarily today, but, you know, maybe I'm off on this and maybe need a little better explanation.
Yeah, there's actually a max portfolio amount of $5.5 million. So there's a cap to this, and you also need to understand that there is quite a bit of work that goes in to the whole process when someone applies, and then the background checks and all of the paperwork and preparing for closings, and oftentimes those closings get pushed back, and so that work has to be done again, and they have to be very nimble and on the spot to make sure that they are meeting each one of these closings. So there is quite a bit of work that goes into each one of these applications that come through.
Yeah, and again, I totally understand from EDWC's the amount of work that goes into this, the staff time and all the rest of that. But if it's not efficient, to me, it's something that should be looked at. I mean, I totally get, I've been through a few closings and title searches and all the rest of it. I totally understand a million things that can go wrong and how it has to be looked at every day. I get the staff time. It's just, if we're doing something like this and it benefits the community greatly, but its cost just seems very high.
Well, I believe, and I've been working very closely with the EDWC in this process, and I believe that their process is extremely efficient. It is just a matter of taking the time that it needs to ensure that all of these closings happen, and that they are certainly not the ones that would have to be at fault to push any of these closing back. So it's a matter of being extremely nimble and extremely detail-oriented, and there's a lot of time that goes into achieving that and making sure that we have what we need at each one of those closings.
If I may, actually, Christian, go ahead. You had a question?
I don't want to.
No, by all means, please. That's fine. No problem.
So the calculation that you should be doing, Mr. Supervisor, would be over the 5.5 million from a percent standpoint, if you're trying to look at it versus the 500,000 a year, because the actual execution of that program involves both the application, the underwriting, and the servicing. And the objective was for an on-demand, meaning as, you know, people are seeking to purchase homes, that you can be there and be responsive, not just respective to their closing, but as funds become available, particularly if new funds are introduced. So the ask, if you will, is can we absorb any circumstance up to $5.5 million worth of a portfolio size for Hart & Homestead, and that's the number it takes to do that. And so the issue is not efficiency. We're at an extremely efficient process. It's down to well-documented steps for each piece of it. The consumer mortgage environment is in and of itself not efficient. Thank government and regulation that goes with that. But outside of that piece of it, what you're paying for essentially is the ability to execute no matter what you need and what the consumer needs up to that 5.5 million. So when you look at the retainer, compare that against $5.5 million worth of home incentives that are out there, because they need to be serviced after as well. So it's that proportion, and I think then you'll get to a different conclusion potentially. I don't want to speak for you in your mind, but that's the math.
Yeah, and I, again, that does make it a little bit more palatable when considering the 5 million plus. You know, it is just a matter of, it might be the best program in the world and all the rest of that, but sometimes we have to question what it is that we're trying to accomplish. I think the motives are all good here, but if the execution isn't quite what we had hoped for, you know, then I see it as being somewhat problematic. Now, again, I'm all for the Hart & Homestead program, you know, in itself, and I do understand the amount of logistics that are going into it. You know, I guess, but I have to be able to explain this to my constituents, you know, how much bang we're getting for our buck. When the numbers look very skewed, you know, I'm going to get attacked. I need to have some kind of background, say, well, no, what you really need to understand, and, you know, this is why, you know. So if you, I think Josh got something, I'd love to hear from you, sir.
The chair recognizes the county executive.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your questions are spot on, and you should keep asking them, just like you're suggesting. I think our accountability to the constituency demands it. Specifically, let me, everything Christian said in that wonky matter is 100% true, and I say that with love. That is incredibly important to get us to the point of we are trying to deliver service at a Burger King level, your way, on demand. If we were, you know, able to stack up, to use your language and what you live, if we were able to just hold off and deliver caskets once a month on the dates we want, that would be one thing. But we need to be able to do it in real time as these home sales, in our case, happen. And sometimes there's going to be high peaks, and sometimes there's going to be low valleys. You can't have a part-time person that comes in for a day and deals with it and then comes back another 3 months later. You have to have them at all times. Sometimes that creates some inefficiency, but the bang for your buck that you're getting for $300,000 over the course of a program that's valued at $5.5 million, I think is worth every nickel, not to mention every ounce of time that's not immediately spent on Hart & Homestead, we'll be able to resource our Economic Development Corporation, which we already are getting one hell of a bang for the buck out of. So they're going to be able to have a little bit of extra stretch in that rubber band of the dollar to be able to do even more, I think. And that was an important trade-off in asking them to take on this heavy lift, which I will also emphasize, by working with our partners in the nonprofit sector at EDWC, it's not a government employee. So I'm very, it took a long time for us to get to a place where EDWC is willing and able to take on the risk of this additional workload and be able to cover some of the other blind spots that exist when you take on that much risk, while at the same time keeping us out of additional growth of the size of government, if you will. That's how I would respond to any constituent who raises some concern.
Very good. And again, when it comes to EDWC, I'm a huge fan. I've always been. You know, I certainly supported everything we've done with EDWC. And again, I will always ask those questions. You know that. You know, because efficiency is important, and how we as supervisors have to go back to our constituents, and we have to be able to tell people, you know, well, this is why. You know, they read a newspaper article that maybe gives one-line quotes, and I have to be able to, you know, break that down and make it understandable to my people. You know, and I'm not the only one sitting at this table that has that concern. So, but thank you.
You shouldn't be afraid to ask, and we shouldn't be afraid to answer. And at that ratio of 300 and some thousand to 5 million, you're in excellent shape. And not having it inside of growing county government, so to speak,
Yeah.
I think those two data points alone, most constituents I know in Washington County would appreciate that.
To the question, and if there are no other questions, comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 3B, final commitment of ARPA funds. And for that, we have Mr. Aaron Dahl.
Have a handout to pass out. Sorry, we had to take this one right down to the wire.
Thank you.
Sure. This will get posted electronically in the packet, though.
Okay, so the report that you were just handed, let me just walk through a handful of things. You can see in the breakdown so that you don't have to read through it and try to digest it for the first time. The communications enhancements are improvements in building upon all of the material that we've done with Discover Media Works, with our communications team over the course of all of the ARPA dollars. So this is kind of what I would call closeout, and being able to execute on all the dollars we've already spent, making sure that they're not just sitting somewhere on a dead website that nobody knows how to get to them, or they aren't even able to be utilized, getting that information out there. So relatively small amount. The aid to tourism and hospitality, these are some enhancements. You remember we did the tourism grants. We've done a couple of bolt-ons in addition to that. This will be the final bolt-on. There were two projects that were on the radar that we really wanted to be able to fund. These two will be able to accomplish that. That is simply two separate projects at $100,000 each. The economic development dollars we'll talk about more in detail in closed session, but it's again working with EDWC in economic development projects. And finally, staffing 2026 budget. Aaron, can you remind me of that one?
Sure. That's just the Community Development Department for 26.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's the Community Development Department for 2026, the Jamie and Deb's department.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
And everything we've got on here, we've talked about in some way, shape, or form before, with the exception of economic development, which we'll talk in specific detail in closed session about. I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry. No surprises.
If there are no questions or objections, this report will stand as approved by consensus. Hearing none, we'll move on with the next agenda item. And as mentioned earlier, we're moving on to agenda item 3E, Annual EDWC Portfolio Review. And for that, we welcome Mr. Christian Cheshlock.
Thank you very much. Plug this in. What we need to do is give us the rest of the people in. While that's waiting to come up on the screen, does it look like it will or won't? Do we know? Yeah.
Hey, we have light.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your efforts on that. Not giving up. Look at that. Perseverance, the Washington County way. All right.
So, first of all, actually, thank you very much for allowing us to meet with you annually to give you a state of the Impact Loan Fund. It actually wasn't that long ago. You might be wondering, hey, didn't we see each other not that long ago? We met in February, which is off our normal cycle of giving you the portfolio update. So there's going to be some differences in this update from what you may remember in February, just because of we're now moving back on the cycle of a December meeting for you. The top slide here I'm kind of honing in on because we have continued to evolve the brand of this fund, and you'll see that it has its own logo. And part of the driver for that is to really reinforce that this is a fund for growth, that engine of growth that the county executive and this board have talked about in the past, but also because we have different segments that we're evolving, and in order to keep the world simple, you'll see, for example, we've got the small biz segment. In order to keep the world simple, we wanted to align the branding across all those segments so everybody would understand it was under the same fund. In the interest of time, nothing has changed about the mission and vision. And you can see that there are a variety of different metrics that we use to define success, and you'll see what those are below. And later, particularly in closed session, you'll see how we've been actually measuring those metrics. We've had our first projects that started under this new expanded success definition. Are now 3 years later, we've actually gone back to measure actual outcomes from what was projected, and you'll be able to see some of that when we give our more detailed loan-by-loan review. This is our EDWC lending team. Our newest member is Leslie, if you wouldn't mind standing. I believe you've met the other members of the team. She is our senior administrative assistant. She provides support all throughout the lending process, from servicing on the back end to application and closing on the front end. So trial by fire, I know, Leslie, right alongside of support with the Heart and Homestead, which was mentioned earlier. I'd like to turn it over to our Senior Director of Business Finance to share just a couple of statements about some of the successes that you've experienced here in 2024 with your portfolio.
Good evening, everyone. The first slide you're going to see here is celebrating the first loan that we did this year. It was with Vickney and Associates, located in Hartford, and this is a company that's been around for about 20-some years, and they were really looking for a site to stay in Hartford and stay in Washington County. And they couldn't find anything, so they wanted to build a building. They had a few struggles, and we were able to provide some, what we would consider some gap financing, because the appraised value and the construction costs just weren't matching up. And so it allowed that business owner the opportunity to move forward and focus more closely on obtaining new employees to be able to grow the business more effectively in the long run. The second one is a new company that's relocating from Ozaukee County to Washington County. They took a locally built building in the Jackson Park area, and in this case, the individual the company could possibly have funded the entire build-out of and equipping of this new building and moving their 23 individuals into our county, but they needed to preserve some capital to take on some new clients. And so they wanted to preserve their capital so that they could continue to grow the company even more effectively here in Washington County. And they're getting ready to occupy their building in just about another couple of weeks. They're going to start at the beginning of the year. The next loan is for a customer that, if some of you have been here before, you might have noticed that there was a business we'd made a loan to 3 years ago called Brewed Omen. It's a tap house in Hartford as well. And the dream of the couple that own that tap house was to actually brew their own beer. They've been sourcing their beer from many other sources, but they were interested in beginning their own brewery. So they were able to acquire a very old, blighted building next door to them that they are going to be renovating. The key here was that those renovations were going to, again, exceed the value of the appraisal that they could get from a bank, and so they needed some gap funding to help remediate some of the contamination and to revitalize that particular property in the downtown. Now, the next one is one that was approved last week and that we're going to close tomorrow. And many of you have probably heard of Jugs Hitching Post. Well, Jugs Hitching Post's owner is going to be opening a new location in Slinger as part of the revitalization of the Kettle Moraine Bowl that is now going to be known as the Kettle, and it's going to be a multi-faceted family entertainment center. But key to the success of the revitalization and renovation of this property is having an eatery inside. And so the gentleman who is renovating that property was excited to offer that opportunity to Mr. Jug, who owns Jug's Hitching Post, and he's been working hard to renovate that space and re-equip all of that space. So we're going to be helping him out with a loan to make sure that he can be successful with some kitchen equipment, because he is going to be expanding his business tremendously through that. And then the last, oops, we went right past one. I must have held it too long. So as Christian mentioned earlier, we did relaunch our first, our small biz loans this year to help small business owners obtain some capital, small amounts of capital to help grow their businesses. A lot of times they're not interested in borrowing $100,000 or $1 million. They just have a project that would make their business much more successful. So we closed our first one for a business that recently relocated within the county into the West Bend area. But when they rented their property, they didn't realize that they needed to put in a new makeup air system, and they hadn't budgeted for that. And we had just relaunched, and they became one of our beta testers, and we closed our loan with them, and Detail Woodworks couldn't be happier. They have their makeup air, they can do everything that they need to on site, and they don't have to send some of their work out. So they can be more efficient and grow their business faster right here in the community. And that's all I have for you, unless you have some questions.
Any question for this part of the presentation?
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thanks so much. Really a team effort, but Sherry was just instrumental in getting all of these across the finish line. They all had their own challenges associated with them, but we were able to flex and meet the needs of the company when they needed it. I'd like to just point out that when you saw the small biz loan segment, 2 of the successes this year were from the brownfield segment, which I wanted to give a special thank you to this committee and to the County Board of Supervisors for continuing to support that brownfield redevelopment segment. Both of those projects were targeted way early on, many years ago in the inception of the program, as high priority sites, which is one of the reasons we doubled down in executing on projects in those two spots. And that was high priority sites designated by the Site Redevelopment Committee of the county. You will see here, normally our fearless revolving Loan Fund Committee Chair speaks to this topic, but in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly hit on a couple of points here, and we'll move on and save his expertise for the closed session report. But we really wouldn't be able to do and have the successes we have without the Loan Committee. That is the everything of this initiative and this incentive. And we're really proud of the fact that we've been able to, you'll see on this bulleted list, really principles essentially do not violate sets of values that we have occupied from the beginning, and we've been able to hold those strong over the many years, including through some changes of committee membership. We added 2 new members this year. I'd like to point out that your feedback was from last report was heard in terms of wanting to diversify some of our expertise and, for example, the agribusiness area, as well as some of the small business and private equity area, startup area. We've been able to do that with both of those new members of the Loan Committee. One of the key features here is that we're able to recruit some of the top expertise because they know that they do remain confidential and that the deliberations that they do are made on the basis of business decision and not politics. And that again has been a key piece of the puzzle here. We have continued to advance our work. You will get an electronic copy of the slide so you can see it in more detail in terms of really ensuring that we have the expertise on that committee that's necessary to carry this forward for many years to come. And you'll see here we've outlined various targeted talents that we need from the committee and that we're comparing committee members with to make sure that we have all of those talents on board. The roles of the county, EDWC, and our loan committee have not changed. And you see those here by way of reinforcement. They've continued to stay the same. While some things change, that has not. Here is the current status of the portfolio with closings that have been happening as of this week. There's one that we're projecting we'll be able to close as well tomorrow. That, again, we'll brief in closed session. Right now, we're looking at 46 projects with those December closes and a 43% utilization rate at $8.4 million currently deployed. You'll see in the pipeline report, again in closed session, that that describes some of the stuff that we've got coming up. There's quite a few bigger projects. I would say that's the key observation to offer you, whereas 2024 had, I would say, smaller projects in our portfolio in terms of our participation size. The next round of projects for 2025 is looking to be in the millions of dollars in some cases. So very, very large scale projects that we're managing. You'll also see that the segments have really been boosted in terms of the types of loans that are out there. Again, additions in the brownfield segment in particular. Just by way of quick refresh, we risk score every note, not just at the time of inception, but once a year as part of our risk review. And that score is basically a 1 through 5. The higher the number, the more risk is being carried. And you saw the various components of that risk scoring there. This is the way that our portfolio stands as of today. For our year, that should say fiscal year 2024 for Q1, 2, 3, and 4. We too have been moving right at the speed of business and didn't make that adjustment. My apologies for that. But no defaults are reported for this year, and we're not anticipating any for the rest of the month here. So 2024 will be a default-free year. The default that occurred in 2022 made its way through the courts, and we will be doing a write-off and have written off $16,822. That was one microloan. So for the first time in the history of the impact fund, there is a write-off in the portfolio that we have certified and has already been written off. The average risk score is held very stable despite some of the fluctuations in the economy and the inflationary environment. 2.79 is very close to where it's been in the past, even with the introduction of some of these smaller projects and some additional kind of unique gap financing scenarios. It has not changed the risk score. So with that, be happy to address any questions for this segment. Otherwise, we'll save the rest for later.
Any questions on the report?
I'm good.
Thank you very much.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you the status.
You are welcome. We will move on now to item number 5, a closed session in which we would entertain a motion to go into closed session, including the county, the EDWC board, the executive committee, and county staff. And we had a motion from Supervisor Kelling and a second from Supervisor Schultheis. And I would entertain a motion on the authorizing the county executive and EDWC to work with the business mentioned during closed session to develop a pre-development agreement.
So moved.
Seconded?
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Authorized to execute the pre-development agreement? Is that a friendly amendment?
That would be a friendly amendment, yes.
Eileen, good? Yeah, that works. Okay.
And you're both still in favor? Very good. Any discussion?
On the amendment first?
It was a friendly amendment, so it's not a separate item.
Gotcha, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item number 8 on the agenda is to move back into closed session for the next EDWC item to include again the executive committee, Supervisor Toma as present, county staff, and EDWC staff.
I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session.
Second?
Motion from Shadron, second from Schulteis. And a roll call vote starting with
Aye.
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 We are in closed session. Thank you. And there's nothing to act on, so we will return to item 3C on the agenda. Update on strategic priorities.
All right, thank you. So what you're seeing is similar to what you will all be seeing in your committees that you also chair. So we're giving an update on the strategic priorities that were identified at the last retreat and approved by the board a few months ago. So for my portion here, I just had two to give you an update on. We'll update the full board next month with all of the projects. So the first initiative to give an update on is the AI use at the county. So that goal is on track. We've got a draft of a white paper prepared. We're right now in the internal review process. That draft is with the exec's office. We're reviewing that internally. Simultaneously, we've been the state's got a number of AI study committees that we're monitoring. We're attending events in that space as well. And this committee and the full board will hear more on AI after our internal review and as this project develops a little bit further. Moving on to the second initiative, which is the shared services grants. The first two goals have been completed. So that first goal is a report on the process and the dashboard itself. So I've given several progress reports along the way. And a couple of months ago, I showed this committee that dashboard that's online as well. So that goal is complete. The second goal is to achieve ongoing savings of $1 million. Happy to report that this year we'll have hit $1.2 million in ongoing value provided to our municipal partners. And then next year, we're poised to achieve $1.7 million. So those two goals are complete. The remaining goals are parked out in the future, but we're prepping for those, and we're well on our way with those as well. So happy to answer any questions if you've got them.
Are there any questions? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 3D, update on the Employee Health Center.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have with us today, of course, Aaron Dahl, who just reported, and also Todd Scott, our Human Resources Director. As you know, we've talked in the past as regard to our master plan and the on-site clinic. Some of you are involved with the adoption of the on-site clinic. I think it's almost 8 years ago already. It's been a partnership between the city of West Bend and Washington County during that tenure. Most recently, we've changed partners. It was QuadMed when we first started, is now Froedtert. Over the course of about the last year, we had some rumblings and even conversation, and by we I really mean Todd, with the HR director from the city of West Bend primarily, and indicating their consideration of removing themselves from the partnership. When that had originally happened last year, there was communication back that there's some terms within the agreement where we need certain timelines to be met before the city could get out of the agreement. They were already past that date, if memory serves, the last year in regard to that. And so fast forwarding into this year, we hadn't heard a whole lot until about the middle of the year. And then kind of things went radio silent. We, of course, have been starting our process with our master plan on moving that clinic, which for us is a substantial investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, of course, in order for us to make that move, under the considerations that we've had for the last 8 years in the partnership, we are planning accordingly, and Scott and his team are doing that work, and I know Chairman Chodron is beginning to dive in on that as well. Kind of abruptly, we received a letter dated December 3rd. It is directed to Todd Scott, our Human Resources Director, from Michelle Hoye, the Human Resources Director in the city, notifying us that as of effective July 1st of 2025, They have decided to terminate our agreement and services with the county and Freighter. So this, of course, creates a number of issues for the county. The first and foremost being this is not consistent with the agreement that we have with them. They, according to that agreement, they needed to notify us by October 1st, as memory serves. Let me just yes, October 1st. So this is a breach of that contract. In addition, just a kind of technically silly miss on their part was the letter only went to Todd. By contract, I think it had to come to the county executive's office as well, although it said county administrator. In any event, this is a breach. Unfortunately, with the city of West Bend, that's a problem. And for us, it creates issues with our move, not to mention our contract that we have with Freighter as well. The benefit of the partnership has been immense, I think, not the least of which is we're able to both collectively get a higher level of service than we could get individually. That is to say, rather than, for example, a medical assistant, we get a nurse practitioner. Am I getting that right?
It's probably the amount of hours we can have, 3/4 hours is full-time.
Okay. So additional hours rather than staffing necessarily, but give or take in one way, shape, or form, we can get higher level of service. This will force us to either A, contemplate lower levels of service, hours, types of staffing, or what that remodeling project looks like, and we're within months of having architectural designs completed and so forth. So this puts us in an unfortunate position. I have been in communication with the mayor. First, that he knew that this letter was going out. He was aware that there was conversations. I don't know about whether the letter itself went out, but certainly he knew that they were being advised as such. I've since communicated to him what this means to us. I did share with him that we were going to have this discussion with you to make you aware of all of the impacts. So he does know that conversation happened today, just so you know. I didn't want him to be blindsided that we were having a discussion of this nature. We want to keep a good relationship with him and the city of West Bend at large. Looking at the contract and the timing, again, if, as the contract reads, we believe that this notice would actually apply to, they could get out as of January 1st of 2026, not 2025, because they missed that deadline. We currently assume the cost implications are we have about 500 employee visits annually. The cost of the clinic is about somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. Their portion of that is 30%. In other words, somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000 is what they contribute, just to kind of put in context what it would mean if they were to leave. So it all really depends on how utilization is split, but just to kind of give you a ballpark of what we're facing and now what we're going to have to deal with here with these partners putting us in this situation. So there is some cost avoidance with both employees in the county by having the clinic, and that's a little bit harder to get the hands around and put specific dollars towards. So it's a little bit of an abstract exercise, but we think roughly $120,000 per year is what we're talking about. So the plan moving forward, so you're aware, and really we would like to have the committee's blessing on this, is to hold the city to the agreement that they signed eight years ago, and protect the interests of all county taxpayers by holding them to that obligation. Certainly there could be any number of cures that attorneys will work through and figure out, but also at the same time we need your blessing at a minimum, and eventually approvals through construction and so forth, to seek other options on clinics and partnerships. And now, is it here anymore, or do we go to a different location? What does this do to our contract with Freighter? So really I'm seeking your approval and blessing to continue with those pieces in particular, knowing our partner right here in our backyard has kind of put us in a spot. So I guess in the end of the day, putting you on notice and publicly them on notice that We will be seeking a cure to hold them to their obligations, and then we're going to seek other options with your blessing, both of those things. So building and the partnership with Freighter.
Real quick.
I would,
I'm sorry.
we don't do anything without a motion unless it's background information. We have the background information. I would move that the executive committee direct the county executive and staff to work to resolve the breach of contract and propose solutions for the county going forward.
I would second it.
Any further discussion?
If I may.
Yes.
So are we, well, first of all, what kind of, I don't know between, forgive me, as I don't know, if they backed out of this deal or refused to pay, what do we do? What are our repercussions from this? What, as far as how do we force them? Do we sue them? Do we,
That's what Brad and Eileen are for.
I would just note at this time that an open record session is probably not at the time to discuss our legal strategies, but there are some.
Fair enough. I just want to know that there was some.
Well, and that's the point. Like, it's embarrassing that we have to have legal strategies with the county seat, which is why we wanted to make sure you knew immediately. It's got financial impacts to us in real time. It's got long-term financial impacts with the partnership with Freighter, with the building project that we're talking about. I felt like the committee has to be aware of it, and the mayor has to be aware of it.
Thank you. Anything else?
Follow up yet. Also, so in your discussions as far as moving forward with Freighter and building space and all the rest of that, are we doing also a financial impact for, do we need, is this beneficial for us without a partner to continue to do it, as well as, employee impacts, how it affects our employees, those types of things. I want to be assured that we're also looking at that, because we may have to change direction.
Aaron, do you or Todd want to talk about the work the broker's already working on?
I must excuse myself. Second Vice Chair, if you would take over.
Yeah, certainly I can just brief you that we do have a broker that works on our benefit plans. And so we've had conversations with them recently about them going out and looking at all of our possible options to include both impact on employees as well as impact on the county, looking at everything from potential other partners to if we keep the clinic here, do we keep it at full-time, part-time? What's the cost benefit to that, both, again, county and employees? And so across the board, a full-fledged, do we look at a remote clinic? Do we close the clinic and have nothing altogether? I mean, what does that really look like? And so I expect that probably over the next month or two, we should have some really strong information. Again, it's going to be all hypotheticals because, again, we're not going to know for sure. But they have a lot more experience in it than we do. And so we're going to rely a lot on the knowledge that they have and then be able to weigh that.
So you'll come back to us, I'd assume.
Certainly.
In the next couple of months. I mean, because we're at this stage where we are designing the possible new clinic.
Correct.
I guess better that we at least have this point now that we know that they're interested in getting out. How that's going to look or whether or not that even occurs is unknown at this point, but it does affect our construction schedule and our plans moving forward. So
It does, and the fact that this is the way it was handled, the breach. I mean, it's just complete unprofessionalism on the behalf of the administration, and puts us all in a situation, taxpayers most importantly. And so we've got to get out ahead of it with all of our constituents, but with you in trying to resolve those things. And I'm confident in my conversation with the mayor that he and the council will engage and be more neighborly than the administration has.
yeah, and I would say as a supervisor of West Bend, my district being here. This is very disappointing. I think that the mayor and the council, I don't know that, and this is just speaking for myself, I don't know that this is good policy and this is a good way to work. We all serve the people. We should all be cooperating and working together to solve problems. And this really is not a good mark. And I find it a little bit hard to believe that it's even coming from the mayor or from the council. I think there might be other forces at play, because I really do believe that the mayor wants to work well with the county, and I believe so does some of the council, some maybe not, but I know that there is a voice there that does believe in cooperation. So,
Well, and to use the illustration of the UWWC campus, in our joint meeting with them, I mean, they were clearly willing to come to solutions that benefit both sides. It was a matter of communicating, and that's been lacking for as long, 8 years. It's been
yeah,
lacking. It's
and
bad.
that comes from leadership. Really, good leaders will resolve to at least keep communicating and working together. And so I find it highly disappointing that the administration of West Bend would engage in this type of drop a letter, not follow proper procedure, or reach out in any way. And so
I just hope for the sake of the taxpayers of West Bend and the city employees that there's a plan, because with 28 days' notice, it's hard for us to make plans. So for their employees' sake, I hope they have one on their end.
yeah, and certainly they have a lot of employees, I'm sure, that come to our clinic and get their shots and well baby care or whatever here, and to just say, well, that's over with, that's pretty disheartening. So, is there any more questions on this topic?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so there we go.
So you have a motion and a second on the floor, I believe.
No, so we do have to take a vote on this? I thought it was just.
Yeah, I
You're
thought,
giving direction to us for next steps, which is perfect.
yeah, we can just take it that. All right. Is there any further business? All right. All right.
Yep, you got to vote on the motion on the floor.
Oh, the motion. Yeah, we're still a quorum. We got 3 of 5. So, okay. Without further discussion, then, I'll signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Nay? All right. We have a motion, and with that, that concludes all the business of today. Next meeting, January 15th. And so I declare this closed.